the Juden Guild. Its head was Count Sergio. In an empire whose lands stretched from the south to the north and from the west to the east, the south was definitely the most tidbit rich in natural resources, and the guild managed to achieve economic supremacy there. And the eldest daughter and heiress of the Sergio family was the sitting Adelina Sergio of the mansion. Adeline was very happy to see Jur and asked to come through and have a seat. The girl didn't think Jur would arrive early. Adeline swept up that Jur had left Rian last week, so she had expected him yesterday. The man remarked that he had stopped by somewhere else. The girl asked how he was doing and if he'd found anything worthwhile. The man said they were famous for their fabrics, so he had a fleet of samples he wanted to present to Adelina, so he decided to ask if she wanted to see. The girl thought about it and agreed, but asked him to do it a little later. The boy wanted to say something to Adele, but he stopped talking. The girl decided to ask again. Jur said it was no big deal, and he was just surprised. She had never put off work before. Adele didn't see anything wrong with that, and was glad that they would be able to see each other more often in the future. The guy turned to Adele and said that she looked so beautiful. This is the reaction the protagonist expected. The heiress was used to getting up at dawn and rising at 5 in the morning, but for the first time in years, instead of going through the backlog of paperwork, she looked in the mirror first. Adele was unmade and untidy, but considering how much effort she usually put in, the main character's looks promised her a great future. Adele asked Jir what he wanted to tell her, maybe something on his face. The guy apologized and said it was okay. Adele asked Jir if he was sick because the business trip was probably too tiring. The boy was shy and said it was nothing like that. The heiress didn't believe him, because those running eyes gave him away and he was definitely worried about something. He looked rather stiff. The protagonist wondered how many times he had swallowed in the last minute. The main character decided to make the first move since things were so bad. Adele wasn't strong at it, but at least give him a little nudge and everything would be fine. She told him that she had heard about him stopping by Satona on his way here. The boy confessed that it was like that, but he was surprised that she knew about it. Adelina wondered why he had gone there, as they had enough jewelry. It was logical that the most powerful guild had the best jewelry. Nowhere in the south could one find something more luxurious. Still, he stopped by a town famous for making gemstones. The protagonist thought there could only be one reason for this. The girl asked if he had found something worthwhile. Jur was very confused, and Adeline herself noticed it. The guy couldn't string words together. The protagonist wanted Jur not to be embarrassed so much. Adele asked her interlocutor to relax, because they had known each other for not the first year. It's been almost 9.5 years since Adeline and Jur first met, and it's been 3 years since it happened. Jur said, embarrassed, that he did have something to say, but he couldn't find the right moment. Jur wasn't sure how to do it, but he thought Adele should hear it first. Adele thought with a smile that it made a lot of sense because there was no one else who had yet to hear a marriage proposal. The protagonist understood that he was worried, but she didn't have that much time. The protagonist needs to either push him or diffuse the situation because her answer is already known. She was very curious as to what he had left to do. Check the goods that had arrived at the port and look at the revenue reports from all the branches. Unfortunately, he'll have to spend the whole night doing that. In that case, he'd have to do it now. Jur asked Adele if she was listening. The girl lied that she had heard everything, but at the time, she was just daydreaming. But Adeline, as a true heiress that she can even, upon waking up in the middle of the night to hold a meeting in 5 different languages, can easily predict what Jur is about to say. A man who had already confessed his feelings to her once before, this cold-hearted guy couldn't even raise his head right now because of his worries. Come to think of it, sticking out of his jacket pocket is a square box. It's at least 2.5 inches wide, which means there's at least a 3-carat ring in there. If Adeline couldn't have guessed all this, she should have given up her place as heiress at that very second. The protagonist said that it was the only right decision, because a lot had changed in 3 years. Jur was very glad that she had so easily entered into his position. His words angered the lady, for she did not understand what it meant to be in his position if they were not strangers. The guy with a smile thanked the girl for supporting him, because it was because of her that he became braver. The girl was angry, because he thanks her for supporting him instead of agreeing. She felt like she was encouraging a friend that she was going to propose to someone. Jur said with a smile that he hoped she liked it and added that he wanted to show Adeline first. He wanted this because the protagonist has excellent taste, and Adeline must be perfectly aware of her preferences. The protagonist was beginning to realize that this seemed to be the case. The boy pulled out the ring and placed it in front of my lady. She never thought the day would ever come when she wouldn't smile when she saw the diamond. Adele saw the bird, and she just wanted to fly away with it. The main thing was not to freak out. I had to put her in brain-saving mode. The girl praised the ring and said that it was beautiful and the execution was just fine. The man was very pleased and said that he hoped Noelle would like it too. The protagonist didn't understand anything, and there was a moment of awkward silence. The girl had to ask something before her mind went completely off. Adeline decided to approach from the sidelines with her own words. She said it wasn't that she was interested, and she just wanted to clarify if he was talking about her little sister, Noelle Sergio. The maid was thrilled to see her mistress. She asked with a broad smile how it had been. She asked what Mr. Girox had said, for Adeline had said he had visited the jewelry shop in Seaton. The heiress with the passive replied that he was there. The maid said that was correct, because it was necessary to prepare everything in advance. She was very excited and was fascinated by Adeline's eyes. The maid continued to praise the lady and said that she was the most beautiful woman not only in the South, but in the whole empire. And it was no wonder the master had fallen in love with them as well. But all Adele told Jackie was that she had a bit of a headache. Jackie was sure that her mistress was probably confused right now, and even if it was Adele, it was hard for even her to be happy about being told to her face that she loved someone else. Adele asked if Jackie would leave her alone for a while, since it was such an occasion. The maid was shocked and didn't understand what her mistress was saying. The heiress added that Jur had told her that he liked Noelle. She was shocked at the maid's reaction, because she acted like she'd been rejected. Jackie's face was simply indescribable. The maid immediately became aggressive and didn't understand how it was possible. Jur had just recently confessed to Adeline. Jackie didn't understand how he could be so winded. Adeline thought about it herself. Jackie didn't want to believe it, because this Jur had been keeping mistress away for so long, and she didn't understand how it had happened. The main character said it was 3 years ago, but Jackie didn't want to hear it because he said he would wait as long as it took. Jackie spoke, but Adele interrupted her and asked if she had been eavesdropping. The girl shut up immediately. 3 years ago, Girox had asked for Adeline's hand in marriage, but then the battle for the place of heir was heating up, and Adele could not accept his proposal. Then the girl told Jur that if his love was sincere, he should do it again in 3 years. If he would not change his mind, she promised to think seriously about it. That's exactly what the protagonist had said at the time, but she never thought he would love her sister. Jackie asked if she needed to call Lady Noelle right away. Jackie noted that she'd wondered earlier today why Noelle had been asking all day why Adelina was asking when Adelina would be back. Jackie wondered if Adelina would let her get away with it, but Adeline answered nothing, and Jerry wondered what her mistress was doing, assuming she was working. Her mistress said she understood Jackie's resentment, but she wished she would keep it quiet because she needed to deal with this soon, or she would be sitting around with it until morning. Jackie thought her mistress was angry and wanted to leave it like this. Madam reiterated that if she didn't get her job sorted out, 32 businesses wouldn't be able to open tomorrow, and hundreds of employees would be inconvenienced, and if their families were included, that was thousands. Plus, Noelle would probably come in on her own. Noelle came in after all and asked if she could come in. Adele gave her permission to do so. Noelle said she was sorry and asked if her sister was angry. The girl lowered her eyes and said that she never thought Jur could ever lay eyes on her and pay attention to her. Noelle went on to say that it was her fault, but if her sister was okay, she was very glad. Adele said she was not okay and asked Noelle to leave as she had a lot of work to do. Mistress told Noelle that she understood her and would discuss it with her tomorrow if she woke up before the heiress left. Adeline asked Jackie to walk Noelle to her chambers so she wouldn't faint. Jackie started to walk Noelle, and she tried to say something. Noelle was not given an excuse. Adele was sure they were gone and went to check the window because she sensed something was wrong. The girl angrily asked when the guy came in and didn't understand who allowed him to peek. The man said it was not his fault that she noticed him so late. The guy justified himself by saying that she was the one who told him not to go through that door. But that wasn't an excuse for Adeline, because going in through the window wasn't a good idea. The man handed the bundle to the mistress and asked if it was what she had told him about earlier. It only gave Adeline a headache, but it still did the job perfectly. Who would have thought Adele and this guy were related? His name is Caden Sergio. He's the Count's only son and Adele's younger brother, a half-brother to be exact. He came to this house when the protagonist was 14, and immediately made his point. The boy was all beaten up as he got to know Adeline. He said he didn't have a name, but when he did, he'd be sure to let her know. The boy apologized and said that he wasn't interested in money or the guild, and it was unlikely that anything would change in the future, so he asked not to be killed. He lay bloodied in the butler's arms, and the protagonist didn't understand how she could not accept him. As a result, it was Adele who gave him his name and a room in their home. Caden grew up under her wing, and in time, Adele began to entrust him with the guild's most important tasks. Most of these cases involve dealing with those who chose to embezzle their wealth, so it cannot be said that he acted solely within the law. Adele ordered Caden to go because she was tired and she could look at the papers later. Guy asked if that jerk Jerox had changed his mind. The protagonist was very curious when even he had time to find out. Caden asked if he had to be killed because he was just waiting for the order, and if that was what she wanted, he would grant her wish. Caden isn't kidding when he says something with that look on his face. The last time he'd had that look, the heir to the same family had lost an arm when he insulted Adele in public. But given that there were no witnesses or evidence of a crime, Caden's involvement is just Adele's guess. Adeline told Caden that they didn't need to do that yet, because Jur would still be useful, since you couldn't find an accountant like him by day. Besides, Caden had no right to do that, and Adeline didn't recall giving it to him. After saying that, Mistress asked Caden to stay out of the way and just do his job. Mistress said she would take care of her own business somehow. Caden really didn't understand why his sister pretended not to know. The main character acts like she's unaware that Noelle isn't really who she seems to be. Adeline didn't like those words, and she asked Caden to watch his language. Caden was in agreement with all of Mistress's wishes, but he thought it was funny, because there was a time when he knew things that even Adeline didn't. When Caden left, Adeline thought about how he had no manners at all, and she thought Caden only knew how to fight. The protagonist could easily punish him for such behavior, and if necessary, even kick him out. But she doesn't do it for one reason only. All because the main character's cute and cuddly little sister is actually a very bad person. Adele remembers her past life, and to make a long story short, it could be called the life of a miserable beggar Korean girl. After overcoming all the obstacles, Adele got into a good university. But unfortunately, it did not help her in life. A good university was like a clay spoon, which is an idiom meaning a poor life. The protagonist worked like a horse, without getting a bit of gratitude for it. She slept at work for several months for the sake of her dream, but her achievements were appropriated by her boss from a rich family with good connections. And when the girl was no longer able to tolerate, and having had enough, came for answers to her questions, she heard only questions about why she had come and a request to ask her parents these questions. This mean world was not giving life. The protagonist was also capable of much and only asked for permission to try. If she was sent abroad, she would not dabble in drugs, but would only learn. Relationships, marriage, whatever the family wanted. She believed she could do it. Adele didn't want to fight over appetizers anymore. She wanted to fight over the main course. She wanted to light a fire between parents and children and fight. The main character yelled about everything that had accumulated until she stumbled and began to fall. She wanted a rich family, too. Adele should have woken up again in the grayness of tomorrow, but she couldn't open her eyes. It was Korea. The gentleman was called very quickly because a miracle happened, and Adele's eyes changed color. They turned pink. The protagonist didn't understand who all these people were and why they entered without asking. Her hands were moving on their own. It made her wonder if those hands were hers. She didn't understand why she was roaring nonstop. The main character didn't realize what was going on. She was angry because she had to go to work tomorrow, and if she didn't show up, she would be fired. A man leaned over her and remarked that this color was great and suitable for the jewelry trade. A man named the baby girl, and that name was the beautiful and sweet name of Adeline. The baby was angry because she didn't understand who had allowed him to touch her. The ring on the man's hand seemed eerily familiar to the protagonist. She had seen it somewhere before. This ring was an exact replica of a ring from a book the protagonist had recently read. She couldn't forget it, even if she wanted to, because it was described in such detail. Count Sergio's ring featured an eagle with neatly engraved 18 feathers and glittering diamond eyes. This was definitely it. The little girl even began to count the feathers. The Count was asked to take a look at the little girl because she seemed to really like his ring. The man remarked that she looked just like him, and then the protagonist began to realize that he was really her father. The girl realized that, firstly, she had died, and secondly, she was reborn in the novel she was reading. She became the daughter of Ante Sergio, the head of the most powerful guild in the South. She was brought into a rich family, and not just rich, but mind-bogglingly rich. The baby was actively trying to say something, so her father asked her what was wrong. He took her in his arms, and the baby grabbed onto his hand. There was no way she wanted to let go. Mistress had a big request for a break. She had already had foreign language, fencing, fine arts, and mineralogy lessons today, and now she wanted to go horseback riding as well. The maid said that if she said it to the Count, it wouldn't be good. But Adele simply ordered her not to speak. The girl was just born for it. The protagonist was breathing the air she had dreamed of for so long. Everything was beautiful and simply delightful. And although her mother had passed away quite early, and her father was rarely at home, all these trials seemed to the protagonist a trifle compared to the past life. But even in this perfect world, when Adele was 11, the first trouble happened. A girl appeared, asking the main character if she could call her sister, and introduced herself by the name Noelle. She did show up. No matter how, Noelle showed up exactly when she was supposed to. In the novel, she was a white-haired devil who couldn't be trusted. Noelle Sergio. When the protagonist opened her eyes and heard Count Sergio's name, it was only thanks to Noelle that she realized what was going on. Count Sergio and Noelle were a real family, and Adele was a half-sister. Surprisingly, it was Noelle who was the protagonist of this novel. The author, not thinking long enough, gave her a very ordinary cute name. The typical protagonist is a goody-goody with an angelic face, and the biggest problem was that the novel was published in installments. Perhaps because Noelle was a model of tolerance and forgiveness, readers who were used to stories about psychopaths were tired of reading this snotty novel. It was then that Chloe, Noelle's friend, first appeared. While angry comments continued to appear about Noelle, Chloe was becoming more and more like the main character with each new chapter. In the end, Chloe drowned in positive comments from readers after she overthrew the tyrant crown prince and showed sympathy for the man occupying the throne, thus showing readers the strength of her character. The author, unable to cope with the flood of complaints about Noelle, eventually changed the main character. In stories like this, only the protagonists are forgiven. And the last days of Noelle, from whom that role was stolen, were quite sad. All her actions are turned upside down, and in the final chapters, she becomes the one who weaves intrigue behind her back. It turns out later that a good half of all the atrocities committed in the Empire are Noelle's doing. And if anyone asks how Adele can be so cool with Noelle, it's all because even if Adele kicks her out, and even if she continues to pull countless pranks either way, when she turns 20, she's dead. Adele offered to be Noelle's friend while she was still alive. The protagonist thought she'd done enough. The main character didn't make it to the last chapter, but it is said that she died the most agonizing death. She didn't understand why she would kill the one who was once the main character. The girl felt very sorry for her, and she tried several times to change her fate. But Noelle strove to live a far from righteous life with incredible enthusiasm. At 10, she accused innocent people of stealing and had to be kicked out. At 12, she made an outcast of a poor girl at the academy and drove her to transfer. And even Caden, when he was young and didn't know the truth, had almost died because of her a few times. And every time the protagonist tried to fix things, things started to go badly for the guild. So much so that she was beginning to think she was trying to resist God's will. The protagonist didn't want to save Noelle that badly, but she could have let her do whatever she wanted. In any case, according to canon, she didn't have more than a year to live. In the meantime, the only thing the protagonist can do is clean up Noelle's mess. With money, that wasn't hard to do at all. She didn't want to believe that Noelle had decided to get active. Perhaps the decisive moment is coming soon. Caden is like her, but even though his hatred can burn everything in its path, he walks in front of Adele with his tail between his legs. But immediately, the protagonist came out of her musings and decided that there was no difference because the guild would be at her mercy. She decided that there was no point in thinking about such trivialities and inquired when their next reception was tomorrow. Adele decided she'd better get some sleep. The reception was magnificent. The cream of society was here. Even the best balls in the capital couldn't compare to those at Sergio's house. They said they were going to announce the heir soon, So they're all scrambling. The women were talking about the new heir, Adele, and they thought she was something else. Lady Adele greeted Viscountess Dane, who had chatted her up a few seconds ago. The protagonist remarked that things were rather modest this time around, but she hoped she had a good time. Adele thanked the Viscountess because she felt she was in safe hands, due to the fact that she only supplied them with the highest quality fabrics. Dane was glad Adele hadn't heard her words. The woman said Adele was just flattering her. Jackie was angry because it wasn't the first time the Viscountess had said mean things about Adele at every reception. Adele wondered what this Dane was talking about. The woman said that Adele was cold and calculating, and that things would only get worse when she became head. Jackie asked if Adele would do something about it and say something to her. The maid was outraged that the Viscountess dared to come to the event and open her filthy mouth. Adele didn't want to do anything about it. The protagonist had to check the delivery of new fabrics from the Viscountess. Somewhere there would definitely be a fault, and then Adele would make her pay. Jackie asked what would happen if the marriage wasn't found. But Adele asked not to be silly, because she already knew that was what would happen. Adele didn't care what she said or who she said it to. Adele was determined and didn't want to be barked at in her own house. The Viscountess needs to know her place. You shouldn't bite the hand that feeds you. Even if it wasn't for this unpleasant little thing, Adele would still do this. The Vicomtesse has a lot on her plate lately, and it would be a good lesson for the rest of us. Jackie didn't understand how her mistress had the energy for all this, and assumed she must be wildly tired. But Adele denied it. The protagonist was having fun. Such conflict situations are commonplace for a person of high society. There was nothing she didn't like about this life. After all, the protagonist wanted it so much. And even Noelle's sudden appearance wouldn't spoil Adele's mood. The younger mistress came in. Jur was next to her as well. Jackie asked Adele one more time if she was really all right. Adeline asked why she should be out of order. Jackie justified it by saying that Jur had confessed his love to Noelle, even though he had offered to marry him to Mrs. Adeline a few years earlier. The protagonist calmly said that if she accepted all confessions, she would have remet half of the empire by now. Adele thought about accepting his proposal only because he was a very suitable candidate. Nothing more and nothing less. What happened could be called an exam. Adeline thought she could trust him completely if his decision remained unchanged. Jur was an excellent worker, handsome, and from a good family, but we have to say goodbye to him because it occurred to him to have an affair with someone else, namely with the main character's younger sister. Apparently, Adele's still a bad judge of character. Noelle walked up to her older sister. She greeted her with a smile, but she thought to herself that this was very tiring and stressful. Jerox, who always stood by the protagonist, showed up at the reception with her little sister on his arm. And all the guests were very curious about what was going on, and everyone was no longer interested in the reception that Adele had put so much effort into. Well, here, Adelina decided that it wasn't weird, because even she would stare just like all the guests, because that was the most interesting part. Noelle went out on the balcony with Adeline and apologized. She said she'd told Jur it would be better to come separately, but he hadn't agreed. The protagonist wondered who would ever suspect Noelle's angelic face of anything. The heiress had told her little sister that there was nothing wrong with it, and she would be happy if it worked out. Adele had been confused yesterday, but after some thought, she decided that it was all for the best. Maybe Noelle won't get infatuated with the crown prince if Jur can stand her. Jealousy of the main character. Even if her death can't be avoided, it would be great if she wasn't accused of all the deadly sins. Noelle admitted that it was Jur who told her to go along, and said that Adele, unlike her, would be able to handle everything alone because the heiress could adapt to anything. Adele thought it was for the best after all, because her little sister would remain a storehouse of trouble whether she married or not. Adeline said that Jur was partly right, and anyway, they looked good together and would have to tell her father as soon as he got back. Noelle was afraid she'd cause trouble for the main character, but the protagonist said there was no problem and asked that Noelle should run quickly to her young man because he must have already waited. The older sister remarks that Jur looks at Noelle with such love that she can't dream, so she shouldn't keep him waiting. Jackie approached the protagonist and remarked that her mistress was very good at hypocrisy, and of course Noelle looked upset, but Adeline might well have made a sadder appearance. But the protagonist didn't want to do that. The maid remarked that she thought her younger sister was worried about Adeline after all. But the protagonist said that there could be no worry because she dared to come here. It's safe to say that the entire nobility of the South has gathered here. The protagonist would be worried if she even noticed a speck of dust on her older sister's dress, but Noelle had nothing to do with guild business and shouldn't be here at all. The main character thought about the fact that maybe she really should have pretended to be upset, but decided that it couldn't be helped if she really didn't care. The main character decided to give it a try after all, and asked Jackie if she looked upset, but the girl said maybe only slightly. So the mistress didn't understand what to do, and assumed that most likely to shed tears, which she didn't have. Jackie remarked that mistress was good at it. That was true, but she didn't want to do it, so Adeline asked the maid if she had to throw a tantrum sobbing on the floor in the morning. Suddenly, there was a strange sound, so the maid asked her mistress what was wrong. The girl asked her to be quiet because it seemed to be a man's voice. Jackie decided it was nonsense because they were the only ones standing on the balcony, but Adele was sure she had definitely heard a man's voice. And then a man came into the room who was very happy to see Adele and told her that he had looked everywhere for her. It was the main character's cousin, Myrtle, and she didn't understand what he wanted from her and why he even showed up here. Even though he is the cousin of the protagonist, he is against the guild's affairs being decided by a woman, that is, Adeline. Even though she gives him a good place in the guild, he looks at Adele as an enemy who took away what was rightfully his. But Adele didn't care, and she even enjoyed seeing the way he was looking at her and getting angry. The guy said he thought Adele would be with Noelle, but I guess he was too late. The protagonist realized that everyone wanted Noelle again. Adele asked if he had come just for her. She didn't understand why he was grinning, so she assumed he was up to something nasty again. Myrtle turned back and remarked that all those people used to follow her around before, but now they did. But Adeline interrupted him and said he was trying for nothing because it didn't make her angry at all. Of course, the protagonist noticed that there were a lot of people gathered near Noelle, but after her spectacular appearance with Jer, it was expected. Adeline told Myrtle that if he had all the time in the world to worry about such trivialities, he should give it to work. Next week, the protagonist's father returns, and her cousin shouldn't think he's going to get away with it just because he's related to him. The boy's implication was that those words should have belonged to him. Myrtle asked Adeline if she thought all those people were idiots and asked why. They were running circles around Noelle, who hadn't even been noticed all this time. Adele asked him to speak plainly. The man leaned in front of her and asked if her uncle would choose an heir this time, and Adele should know that in Sergio's family, only someone who is betrothed can be the heir. Following the family code, only an adult and married person can become an heir. It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl, a child out of wedlock or not. The protagonist blamed herself for not knowing about it earlier. Adele felt as if she'd been hit over the head with a bag. The place she thought was rightfully hers might not be hers. To be not just the daughter of the guild leader, but to take it herself. Ever since she was born, Adele had dreamed of nothing less than this. She never wasted a minute, not a second. She lived like a true heiress. But her father hadn't told her that, and she was angry he hadn't warned her sooner. The protagonist was furious. The man reassured her that her father hadn't told her because everyone had combined a coming-of-age party and engagement party before. But they didn't think Adele would need it either. The man assured Adele that the head had already decided that she, the eldest daughter and legitimate child, would be the heir. The lady did not understand why she was only finding out about it now. It's just that no one thought Mr. Jerix and Mrs. Knoll. Even the Count didn't know it would come out like this. Adeline ordered a stop. Her father thought that Adele and Jerix would do well, so he let the protagonist avoid a marriage of convenience. But one morning that chance just vanished. Adele asked the servant if her father had said anything else. In the first letter after his departure, the head wrote that everything must be prepared for Adeline's marriage by the time he arrived. He mentioned that Adelina's coming-of-age party had already passed, so it would be a good idea to deal with that too, so that Adelina would definitely be the heir. Out of interest, Adelina decided to ask. Adele asked if the servant had said that to Noelle. The man answered nothing. Adeline ordered him that he could be dismissed. Now everything was falling into place. Jackie asked Mistress how that came to be. It was a good question. That sassy Noelle was the first to read the letter and get her nasty paws on Jer, babysitting her because she was going to die soon anyway, and Adeline had been stabbed in the back. The maid couldn't believe that this girl could have thought it through like that. Adele said that Jackie was right, and she really wasn't the one who would stop there. If you think of all her misdeeds in the book, it seems like a childish joke. I don't think her goal was to steal Adeline's fiancé. Noelle had a bastard child mating complex that she kept mentioning, but at last it became clear what she wanted. Jackie asked the lady to calm down, because the head wanted Adeline to be the heir. He wouldn't change his mind because of some silly family tradition. Adeline said that he would change that, and besides, when her father returns and hears that Noel and Jerox have decided to get married, not to know that she would say that. Jackie suggested that perhaps he would punish Miss Noelle severely, but Adeline said he'd probably think she was smarter than she looked. That was the Count, a man who didn't care about moral principles. He considered Adele an heiress not because she was legitimate or the eldest daughter. It was because she had shown him her abilities countless times. What's more, Adele is sure to hear how talentless she is for letting her little sister steal a man away from her. But Jackie denied it. Then Adele decided to ask Jackie to make a bet. Jackie was very surprised and didn't understand what the bet was about. They thought they loved each other, but it all turned out to be just a kick in the butt. Jackie didn't understand what Adeline was going to do and suggested that it wasn't too late to convince Mr. Jerox. But those words made Adeline very angry because she thought she didn't look like a waste container. Because Jerox had already told her that he loved someone else. That's when Jackie asked if Adeline would allow herself to give up her place as heiress. The protagonist shouted that she was crazy because she'd rather die. The main character realized there was nothing she could do. She's put so much effort into this. Adeline can't just give up. Of course, Noel won't become heir in a flash just because of this. But his father will definitely doubt Adeline. I should have gotten on a different horse. I mean, just saddle up with a horse that's better than Jerox. But the chapter returns next week. Once a man and a woman have met eyes, they need no more than a week. But Adeline didn't even meet anyone's eyes. Jackie wondered who Mistress wanted to marry, because you can't just walk up to anyone and say she's in a hurry. Adelina figures it would be better for someone than Jerox. If she wanted to find someone her father would approve of, he would definitely have to be better than him. The father won't look at the money. Their family has enough money. There is no one richer in the south of the empire than Sergio's family. And Adele thinks it's right to choose a kind and caring man who can support her. Someone who won't cause trouble. He must be from the upper class. That's the only way they can get married. Reluctant and quiet, so they can divorce quietly if necessary. He must also be tall and handsome. And it's not Adele's wish, he'll just have to accompany her to official functions. The guy had to be smart, easy to keep a conversation going, and he'd be better off not going out with the ladies. Jackie thought he was pretty good, but it seemed like he didn't exist. These words upset Adeline. As she said it, she became more and more aware of the fact that Jerox was a really good option. He had a good family, and he was tall and handsome and smart and not greedy. Well, sure, you can find someone like that, but it's not clear what to do about abstinence. In short, Adeline needs the perfect castrato. What's more, it's inconceivable that such a man would still be unmarried, unless he's a knight of some temple. Jackie said that when she thought of a man who had all the qualities Adeline had listed, it was among the knights that she should look for. Jackie asked if her mistress knew about Fidelio's knights. The maid did not understand what was happening to Adeline. The girl was very satisfied and did not understand why she herself had not thought of such a thing. But is there really no other way out? It's all a bit like an expedition to find a groom. The protagonist rode in a carriage instead of her maid. Jackie didn't understand when her mistress had time to prepare all this. Adeline said she couldn't go empty-handed. Wherever Adelina goes, money is her map, compass, connections, and source of power. It wasn't a long way to the temple, but considering why she was going there, she'd better be carrying money. Adelina had to find a fiancé by all means. The chapter is already on its way to the eastern part of the empire. If he crosses the Lennox Bridge, it will be only a week before he arrives. And if the bridge was destroyed, it would take 2 weeks to get there. Jackie said that last year it had been restored and didn't understand who would think of destroying such a good bridge. But Adeline said that Caden would do it. Jackie mused that if her mistress was willing to go even that far, she could ask Caden to bring her a groom, because he would definitely do her bidding. Except the groom might not make it there alive. Caden, of course, is willing to run any errand for Adeline, but unfortunately, there are some things you shouldn't trust him with, especially when it comes to someone in Adele's inner circle. Caden can only kill someone. Jackie asked if Madame Caden was afraid of Caden. Those words surprised Adeline because she had no reason to be afraid of him. He is, of course, unrealistically handsome, but the sight of him unknowingly makes you cringe. Starts to shiver after the usual encounter with his eyes. but Adeline argued and said Caden was cute. And if you look closely, Caden looks a lot like a puppy, except without the floppy ears and the tail, but his demeanor is that of a house dog. One wondered if he would have been different if his mom had been alive. As far as Adeline had heard, before Caden had come into the family, his own mother had abused him almost daily. Adeline felt sorry for the boy. The protagonist was content that he had grown up like that. After all, one could go crazy doing such a job. Caden always followed all orders perfectly, never once let him down. The reason the Juden Guild, unlike other large organizations, has no problem with the underworld is that Caden is the Grey Cardinal, the head of that world. Anyway, you don't have to worry about him. And Adeline thought she had a good understanding with him. Jackie noticed that now was the time to worry about Mistress. San Fidelio, a jewel of the South that is not easy to get into, a secret place where priests, monks, knights, and other followers worship the god Ennis, the founder of the empire. Some find peace there, others find faith and courage. The main character is looking for a future groom. It would be marvelous to find a beautiful groom here. Although it's a bit frivolous, no one is better suited than the knight from San Fidelio. The main character has heard that even if a person is just going to be trained in this temple, they check everything from family to personal data, from physical indicators to potential. And if they manage to find even one flaw, the person won't even cross the threshold. So there is no better place to look for the perfect man. However, given that they are clergy, they seem to lack that point. It would be nice if he wasn't a sex machine. It's a marriage of convenience anyway, so let him be careful not to be too annoying, not someone who will run to cause trouble if he's not satisfied in time. Let all the men in the world be castrates, but not Adelina's man. But she'll think about that when she chooses a real husband. In the meantime, the main thing is to look adequate. Jackie asked her mistress if knights could marry at all, because she had never heard of such a thing. Adeline said with a smile that it was rare, but they joined and it wasn't illegal. The protagonist thought about how Jackie could have thought she was on her way, here without recognizing it. Marrying into a sacred temple is wild for ordinary people. However, the guild was the place where all the information flowed to because of money, and among all the information was that related to religious activities. First, to enter the temple, one must undergo arduous training in a monastery. After graduation, all graduates are divided into knights and priests depending on their skills, but only 1 out of 10 can pass this way. And no, it's not too violent. It's quite possible to hold out. But it's the system that made the temple famous. If not everyone can get in, it automatically becomes a very desirable place. Adeline isn't sure about priests, but there's nothing wrong with marriage for a knight. Having a son serve in the temple is a great honor for the family. Hardly anyone would let an heir go there. Jackie pointed out that it is, and also there is no guarantee that she will pass. And she noted that they say a lot of people die during training. As a result, even if a man became a knight, he has neither connections nor money, so they try to earn in advance for a trouble-free old age. And so Adele will find a skillful husband, and he will find a reliable sponsor. The coachman informed the lady that they were almost there and waited for orders. The protagonist asked to wait for a second. Jackie listened to Mistress and said she understood, but warned that they might be forced out of the convent, and it was unlikely they would be able to sneak in unnoticed. Adelina said she had no intention of hiding. After all, the protagonist was from the Sergio family that ruled the South. Jackie assumed that her mistress just wanted to pay them. But the main character didn't understand what Jackie was talking about. She said that the maid and the soap didn't know how much she had put in here before, so there was nowhere else to go. Jackie didn't realize it at first. The protagonist said with a wide smile that she was here to raise money. The man informed her that this would be difficult and asked her to leave. The coachman tried to make things right and assured the man that her mistress was very tired while getting here. But the man said that this was not some backwater temple for them, but San Fidelio. The man didn't understand what nonsense it was, wanting to see the archbishop without even notifying him in advance of the visit. Meanwhile, Adeline was thinking about the man's suitability as a groom. Adeline stepped out of the carriage, and she recognized that it was very rude of her. The man was in complete shock when he saw the mistress, and embarrassed told the coachman that advance notice of arrival was required. He understood that they were all tired, but unfortunately he couldn't break the rules. A stately man approached them and asked what was going on. The man was Bishop Samuel, and he was surprised, for there were to be no guests today. Adelina was a little surprised from the fact that the man was a bishop. Holy knights certainly look cooler, but priests are more to the main character's liking. Even though they look austere, they have a certain appeal. Just like in the movies, Bishop Samuel asked a subordinate who the lady was. Adeline found him to be a rather amusing bishop. The man who had met the lady reported that this madam was telling him that she needed to meet with the archbishop. The bishop was surprised and said that it was quite unexpected that he had come to meet the archbishop without warning, and he said that he could see that these guests had come from far away and that it made things more complicated. Adeline noticed that the man wasn't even looking at her. The man said that she must have been wrong about this place. They honor what the god Anise preached. This place is the epitome of self-discipline and abstinence. It is certainly a place where beneficence and love are taught, a place where one can find one's purpose. The bishop turned to the lady and asked if he could find out what family they were from. Dark hair, clear yet graceful facial features, purple-colored eyes. Of course the protagonist was glad to meet her. She said that she was the daughter of Count Sergio, named Adelina. The man was surprised and asked why Count Sergio's daughter had come here. Adelina said that she was not here now as the Count's daughter, but as the heiress of the Juden Guild. And though the man doesn't have an ounce of foresight, the intuition of a man who has lived half his life as a priest tells him that this is a red flag. First, he'd have to let her in. Adelina said that this place was very beautiful, and surely one's thoughts would clear up on their own if one slept here. The man thanked Adelina for the compliment. He said that, as he said, there are some conditions that allow you to stay here, and there should be no exceptions. He hoped she would show understanding as a member of a noble family. The protagonist understood the man and informed him herself that her guild had similar rules, and they don't provide help to just anyone. However, the priests of San Fidelio were an exception. The hotels owned by Sergio's family provide the best service, and if they didn't make reservations in advance, any of their guests would be left with nothing. Jackie provided last month's Seki, and Adelina reported that they were always open to priests from San Fidelio, as they see that there are quite a few of them, so they are incurring some losses. However, it's not like she can throw out people who carry the word of God, and for that the bishop was immensely grateful. Adeline was merely following the words of Ennis, who had urged that guests who came from far away be treated as family. The main character knew that they were all staying there for free, and she figured they were really thinking of pretending not to know that all these people had spent hundreds of nights at their place for free. The cheapest room cost 300 coins, and she didn't understand why they should provide accommodation for priests for free. You reap what you sow. Dad had it all figured out a few steps ahead, and that helped Adelina quite a bit in the future. Adelina informed me that she would not be staying long, and she plans to leave as soon as she speaks with the archbishop. The bishop didn't even know what to say. He was getting rather anxious, and Adeline noticed that she kept looking at his vestment, and it seemed to be made with their material and looked wonderful. Mrs. Adeline acknowledged that there could be no greater honor for a believer to honor her God. And by the way, it seems the column the bishop is leaning on was donated by their family 2 years ago. The sculpture, too. And Adelina even remembers how long it took her to choose the color of the stone. The bishop stood there in a stupor and didn't know how to answer her. The man said that unfortunately the archbishop was not in the place right now, so the lady could not meet him even if she had entered. Therefore, Adeline could go home and he would relay everything to him. Adeline walked with the bishop and said this inscription under the statue was done by the finest craftsmen in the South. She told me enthusiastically. Said they had to melt down 100 kilograms of gold in one weekend in order to make it in time for the holiday. The entire guild's work was paralyzed at that time. However, Adele was very impressed by those words. Only by seeing it with his own eyes could the answer be found. The man told Adeline that nothing in the world was free, and that among the hundreds of priests and knights who would accept these gifts, only a dozen or so would become truly powerful people, and among them, only 5 can consolidate influence in the South, and only 1 can become famous throughout the empire, not just here. The protagonist and herself noticed that it sounded plausible. However, last month when they were at the temple, the park this man had said the same thing, even a month earlier at the Temple of Thane, and 3 months ago at Maiden's Temple. It looked like he was spreading his net everywhere. But the man told Adele that business people don't chase every penny. That was how the little girl realized the full, deep meaning of her father's words. The bishop approached the lady and repeated that the archbishop was not presently in his place. so Adeline assumed that he meant that someone was in his place. The bishop recognized that Adeline was very polite, so he will allow her to meet, but the head is not the man the lady imagines him to be, so he asks her to keep what she hears and sees here a secret. The protagonist said with a smile that he might not worry about it, because strict secrecy was a basic rule in the Judenguild. And the girl herself thought about the fact that they were talking like that, as if they were hiding a dragon there. Any merchant should be able to compromise since he'd agreed to let her in. They could do them a favor and listen. The man was glad they'd talked it over and decided to go over the basic rules of behavior. Meanwhile, Adeline asked Jackie if she had said she wanted to ask something about the divine teachings, but she was confused and didn't know what to say. But Adelina realized that Jackie wanted to do that because she had not lived a righteous life. Jackie grabbed Bishop, and they started to back away because she had so many questions. Jackie was dragging him along so fast that the man just didn't have time to answer. Meanwhile, Adelina had found the place she needed to enter. The girl only wanted to knock, but she didn't even touch it as the doors somehow opened by themselves. But the room was so dark that she couldn't see anything. Now the protagonist understood what the bishop meant. Adelina bowed and greeted the messenger of the god Ennis, guardian of the sun and moon. She introduced herself and said she was from Sergio's family. She was honored to meet him. The man ordered her to stand up, and Adeline heard a voice that was slightly audible and so deep, it suited the place as well as the fact that he always seemed to be young. The man said he heard that the guest had come from far away. The lady apologized for not notifying her of her arrival in advance. Adelina realized that she had been tactless, since San Fidelio did not usually receive visitors. The man, in turn, noted that the girl must have had a good reason. The protagonist hoped that he wouldn't say no to her and kick her out. It was the first time the girl had met such a strong-spirited opponent, except for her father, and she was very curious who he was. Adelina had seen him once from afar, but that was all she remembered. Due to the fact that most religious events in the empire are held on public holidays, her father attended the main temple of the empire on those days, and Adeline, as the heiress, had to go to the second largest. If she had known this would happen, she would have traveled here. The man said he had heard that Sergio's family was a huge supporter of the temple. But Adelina said it wasn't that important, and so the man decided to ask why she had come after all. He was very impatient. Adelina decided that it wasn't a good idea to give away her purpose from the doorsteps, so she fell silent. And the man in turn said that most of his visitors wanted only one thing, and that was power. This surprised the protagonist very much, and the man directly asked if Adelina wanted to rule the world. The girl denied everything, so the man decided that her visit was for money, but she denied that too. Adeline figured this was some kind of honesty test where she would say she was here for a cool groom, and the bishop would tell her to pick one and get the hell out of here. Because talking to this man looked like he wanted her to say the word and get the hell out of here. It was amusing, for he had a voice too young for a deity. Adelina thanked him for what he offered her, but she was from Sergio's family. The man was surprised that she didn't want power or money, and assumed she wanted control of the magic tower then. The protagonist, in turn, said that she was too busy as it was. The man kept spouting his theories, the next one being that she probably wanted to hurt someone. But Adeline denied it again, because she had Caden, and she didn't need to go all the way out there to make such a request. And besides, when she found out about what happened to Noelle, after others suffered at her hand, she doesn't even want to get involved in all this stuff, so she decided she needed to show herself to someone she could trust. Adelina can say that she also does not need eternal youth or high position or paradise after death. So the man asks if she wants perfect looks, but Adelina says she thinks everything is perfect as it is. Adelina thought it would all be useless when they met the god, and then suddenly there was a light. The protagonist couldn't open her eyes. A young man stood in front of her and made a remark that really made sense. The girl was shocked and didn't expect this man to look so young. Adeline thought about the fact that if her father was with her now, she would take him by the collar and tell her father that he didn't tell her that a real god lived in the temple. The man asked what was wrong with the lady. He thought maybe she was cutting her eyes, but Adele said she was fine. In fact, she was cutting her eyes, but only because of him. Apparently, Adeline's father never met him. The Count knows all the influential people in the South, and it is unlikely that he would just leave someone who can become famous only through his appearance. The protagonist needed to pull herself together because she was not here to melt at the sight of a handsome man. The protagonist noticed that the sun shone much brighter here. She had seen the coat of arms of San Fidelio, but she didn't think he was a priest. Perhaps an aide to the archbishop, but he didn't even look 30. Adelina didn't think he had a high rank. There must be a sword, so she assumed the man was a holy knight. The man swept his guest up and told her that her name was Adeline. He hoped it wasn't too late for her to introduce herself to him, despite the fact that the holy knights are incredibly strong-talented. But the power in the temple is shared by the priests. Most of the duties are shared among them, and only one person is an exception. The protagonist was excited to meet the commander of the San Fidelio Knights, but the man said he hadn't mentioned it yet, and so Adelina said it was just her guess. The man admitted that he wasn't dressed as a knight should be, so Adeline asked if it was hard for him to get rid of his habits. If it weren't for his face, the protagonist would have realized it sooner. Everything about his clothes was perfect, except for the loosely tightened belt. Even before the protagonist noticed his calloused skin on her index finger, he was easy to deduce, given that he knew of her presence beforehand. If that was the case, the protagonist decided that she would apologize, and if necessary, be punished. But the man said she shouldn't do that either. Adelina sighed lightly, because everything was as expected. She realized that she must have bored him already, because he had just finished his ordeal after returning from the ice cave of Callahan. The man was surprised by this and asked if it was written on his clothes too. The protagonist thought he was too naive, because in fact it was even easier to understand. A man like him would not have gone unnoticed. Just this year alone, Fidelio had already held several events at the San, and Adeline had heard nothing about this man. All the unmarried ladies of the southern part of the empire were there, and no one had said a word about him, simply because no one had seen him. Adelina asked how it could be that she, knowing every pebble in the south, had never met the man who had become commander of the knights, only to assume that he was in the ice cave. The man was impressed by the girl's knowledge of Callahan's cave. It's not a position that just falls on someone's head, and it's not something you get by going through the standard training. When you think of the most responsible and dangerous gorge, Callahan's cave comes to mind. That explains its absence. Eventually, the man asked what his guest wanted to talk about. Adelina said that she was concerned about what her life depended on. Marriage is what her future depends on. A marriage of convenience, to be more precise, and Adelina doesn't think it's necessary to go into such details because she came here on a recommendation in search of the perfect groom. Adelina didn't answer anything, so the man decided to ask again. But Adelina thought about whether there could be someone more suitable than her current interlocutor, not just a knight, but their commander. Excellent skills and good prospects, and his looks can't be described in words. Jur, of course, is handsome too, but it's all in comparison. He can represent the empire as the most handsome man. But the protagonist decided to calm down first, and the man just didn't understand what was happening to her. Adelina decided to stall for time and said that he just hadn't introduced himself yet in all this time. After a short pause, the man said that he was Girion Sechin. The protagonist was very pleased to meet him, and she was very glad that she had never heard that last name before. Smart, but without the backing of a powerful family, the perfect candidate. And the age was unknown. The protagonist came to the tricky part and said that she thought the man was younger than her and had already achieved a lot. The man was very surprised by all the words, and Adelina said that she was turning 21 this year, and maybe they were the same age, considering that the person she was talking to looked young. Adelina believed it to be true, but the man said he was 6 years older than her. Adelina apologized for her words, but in her heart she was very happy because he was the right age for her. He was just perfect. Adelina began to apologize for her tactlessness and explained that she did not usually make such mistakes, so she wanted to apologize to him and his wife. The man informed her that he was single, which was unbelievable. It seemed to the protagonist that God really existed, since the archbishop was not there today. It seemed to her that she was regaining her faith in him. But still, Adelina could not relax, because there was one more unremarkable point left. Adeline said that since she had already put Girion to sleep with questions, another one probably wouldn't be a problem for him. Adeline asked if the man liked blondes. The words surprised the man quite a bit. Girion said with calmness that he didn't know why he had to answer these kinds of questions, but if he was asked by such an honored guest, he would answer that he didn't like them, since blondes have either too angelic a face or don't look like angels at all. The man was accepted by Adeline as a candidate. The man asked if the lady was all right. Adeline, on the other hand, wasn't just fine, she was over the moon. She was thanking him for sitting in that damn cave all this time. Girion noted that his guest was probably very tired from traveling here, and he thought that if it was such a serious problem, it would be best for Adele to discuss it with the Archbishop personally. The man suggested that the Archbishop would come in 2 weeks, and then they could discuss everything. But Adele shouted that then everything would be too late, and these words made the man think. Girion made the point that even though the lady didn't have much time, only the Archbishop would be able to help her with what her life depended on. But the protagonist interrupted him and said that this was not true, because he was the one who would be able to help her much better. Adeline assured him that whoever came in here, she felt that no one could be more helpful to her than he could. After a moment's thought, the man said he had a question for her. Girion came very close to Adeline and asked her why she had come. She was just about to tell him everything, but she wasn't sure where she should start, and he might be embarrassed. The protagonist started to say that as everyone knows, a person goes through certain stages in their life, but Girion asked to be shorter. After a little silence, Adelina directly proposed marriage to him. The man didn't answer anything, so Adelina decided to ask if he was all right. The man asked again what she was proposing to him. Adelina repeated it, which made Girion ask again if she was proposing marriage to a man she was seeing for the first time. The protagonist didn't deny it. The man began to look for excuses and said that she did not know him, but it did not bother the protagonist, because he is a man of age, when it is just good to tie themselves to the bonds of marriage, so he is also the commander of the Holy Knights in San Fidelio. Considering that the Archbishop left him as his deputy, it means that Girion is good with a sword and has other outstanding abilities. Girion also speaks a different dialect, which means he's from the capital, but they tie their shoelaces that way in Roman, so maybe he's been there for a while and it's become a habit. Adelina has also noticed that he doesn't like to be in public and is very straightforward. Adeline said with a smile, considering the nonsense she was talking now, and he was still not angry and was listening calmly. He had perfectly developed manners. The protagonist said that if she should know anything else, it would all become clear gradually, because people usually get married without knowing each other at all. Girion said that he didn't know why she was doing all this, but he had only realized one thing about her in all this time. She's not crazy, she's smart, and she's not in love with him, and she won't leave until he listens to her. Guy came to the conclusion that Mistress just needed to hold on to her place as heiress. Adelina told him that this place had always been hers, and it should continue to be so. The lady said that her father thought she would marry her old friend and lowered her eyes. Girion decided to ask her in turn if she considered this man her man. Adeline said it's not about her, and it seems like her friend thinks otherwise, and in general this fiancé and her sister fit together, so it's fine. And then the man said that the sister of his guests was blonde. This surprised Adelina very much, and she didn't even understand who he was and how he knew it, but she said that it was like that. The man turned away a little and made another assumption that Adelina must not have been in love with her ex-fiancé either. The protagonist thought he wanted to laugh at her, but held back. The lady started talking about how she was too busy working in the guild, and it's a world where you can't get enough recognition by doing the job after hours. Girion asked if she was happy with the marriage, because it would not be easy for a normal girl to make such a decision. Adelina said that if someone wanted love, there was nothing stopping them from meeting it, but it was just a little different. The man thought for a long time and asked why he had been chosen then, and added a scattered question, and it was whether Adeline wanted love. But she doubted it, because she couldn't imagine those cold eyes looking at someone with love. The guest said that in exchange she could offer him anything he wanted. If he agreed to play the perfect match in front of her father, she would give him anything he wanted. There is no what her guild does. If it exists, she can provide it. Adeline can make a piece of jewelry that you can't find anywhere else sparkle in his hands for a week. But the man said he wasn't interested in jewelry. Adelina said she could put Trebi's personalized sword in his right hand and the sword of the Jornet in his left, along with a detailed strategic plan for King Juhas's victories. Girion gauged that if Adeline could offer all that, he thought she'd have a line of willing applicants lined up quickly, and she could pick anyone she wanted. The protagonist, of course, assumed he was fastidious, but not that fastidious. Since he's a knight, he's loyal to the core. Adeline said he must have thought about going to the palace. Indeed, she didn't think Girion was going to settle for a lifetime as commander of the knights in San Fidelio. The man didn't understand why she was asking that. Adelina simply said that there was no room to turn around, it was cold, and there were no goodies. It is, of course, a huge temple, but it is on top of a mountain. Adeline hadn't met a person in the south who didn't want to go to the capital, and a gem like this shouldn't stay hidden here forever. If it were a wager, Adele would bet her entire fortune. Adele said she was thinking that, of course, Girion's goal as a knight is to get into the palace, and pointed out that it won't be easy, since everyone wants to get in. And the current government doesn't covet new recruits. This made the man ask what his companion was getting at. The protagonist said that at opportune moments, using the money and honor of Sergio's family by any means necessary, she could pave the way to any position for Girion. The man informed her that he was declining. The protagonist assumed that it would not be easy, but thought that he would at least think about her proposal. Girion said he had listened to the mistress, and that was all he could do. Chin's husband ordered her to leave. Adeline tried to ask him to think about it some more, but the man again told her no and added that he did not change his mind. Adelina understood him and said that he probably wasn't interested in taking the easy way out. The man confirmed it himself. The girl turned around and started to walk away. She gave up so easily, and it made the man wonder if he should stop her. He did not realize what he was even waiting for. Suddenly, the girl told the gentleman to be careful, for from here to there she would lay out a golden road. After all, a road of flowers is too trivial. In Korea, a road of flowers is an easy road to a happy future. Adeline asked to be let go because she wanted to talk quietly. Jackie didn't understand what was going on. Adeline asked her if she could see what was going on since she was asking. A few minutes ago, the commander left the room with Adeline, and she was grabbed. The man said that unfortunately he couldn't lay out a path for her out of flowers, but he could show her where the exit was. The protagonist was getting angry. Jackie noted that the conversation hadn't gone well, but Adele asked Jackie not to jump to conclusions. The maid couldn't stop asking about what had happened. Jackie asked Mistress to turn back because there is a deity in a human body. Adele calmly turned around and said it was a human. Apparently recently Adele looked like an idiot too. Adeline was angry and told Jackie that they might as well not walk her out because she had figured out the way out pretty well herself. If they were going to do this from the beginning, it was not clear why they had decided to act out this scene. The man asked what Adele was talking about, mentioning the gold again. Adele didn't want to talk about it, but Adele said she really wondered why he was asking if she had come for power or money, and wondered what he would do if she said that was what she needed. The man said she would have ended up at the exit much faster. In any case, Girion's answer would remain the same. If it is so important, she should wait for the archbishop. The road back is quite dangerous, and that's why they will be accompanied by knights. That was all Girion could do for Sergio's family. The man informed her that he would walk her to the exit, but Adele denied it. Girion didn't know for sure if Adele would be okay because there are many monsters in these parts. Adele was grateful for the offer, but if he continued like this, she might misunderstand. Jackie asked that her mistress wait because she hadn't made her wish yet, but Adele said again that, like she said, it was a man, not a god. Adele came around the corner and sat down. She was very upset about the embarrassment. Jackie asked if everything was okay and told her to inhale deeply. Jackie asked hopefully, wondering if her mistress was proposing to that deity, that is, knight, to marry herself. Adele didn't understand what was wrong. Now Jackie realized that apparently she had offered, but Adeline beat Jackie to it and said it wasn't love at first sight. He just happened to fit all the criteria. Those criteria included physical appearance, but Mistress Jackie wasn't the type to fall for that. She asked not to be so upset because she could just imagine that she'd confessed to the statue and she'd blown the mistress off. Adele said that she had already forgotten, so she thanked Jackie for reminding her. The maid remarked that it was better than Adele would have wasted a lot of time here. Giving up quickly and going home isn't bad either. Adeline was angry because the situation is worse than ever, and she can't go back. You don't know until you try, so once a girl has taken the initiative, it's hard to stop her. Jackie asked what Mistress would do if he had a lover. Mistress said he had no one and asked if Jackie would let her boyfriend in here. That would be a very big scandal. Jackie started to say something about monsters, but Adeline said they wouldn't meet monsters. That was impossible. Jackie noticed her mistress start to move towards the temple, and now she knew Adeline was onto something. The archbishop stood in the commander's room and apologized for not being able to stop her. Girion simply said that she didn't seem like someone who could be stopped, so it was no big deal. Girion asked lastly if there were still some reports left. Hearing nothing, the man asked when the archbishop was returning. The bishop said it would be about 2 weeks because he had been summoned by the emperor himself. Because of that, he's unlikely to be released early. It seems the emperor's illness is more severe than expected. He was a remarkable man. All the knights in the temple are worried about Lady Adele's visit. The bishop didn't understand how the commander could remain so calm. He threw her out and didn't even blink an eye. The man asked Michael how the situation was in the neighborhood. He told him that the Mother Superior had personally inspected the barrier in the morning. Nothing suspicious had been seen. Everything was quiet. Suddenly, there was a guy from behind who said it was obvious and didn't understand why the commander was even asking this, because there is no one who would dare to infiltrate San Fidelio. The guy added that Bishop Samuel had told him that a lady from Sergio's family had been here this morning. He wondered if it was true. The man turned and said it was true. The bishop remarked that their family had a very rare eye color, so everyone must have recognized her immediately. The boy was very excited and said he had heard they were crimson in color. The guy wanted to approach the commander because he had a pebble on his pen the same color as the lady's eyes. But then he was immediately grabbed by another knight and asked him to behave normally. He said he could have such conversations outside the door, but not in front of the commander. Girion asked them if there was a conversation he could not support. The man who was trying to quiet the other knight immediately said he didn't mean it. And the knight was very happy because the commander says it's okay. All the knight trainees are going crazy. The man is from the north, so he doesn't know. But according to those from the south, she's very famous. The men talked about the bishop and how he seemed to be from the south, and so they asked him if their family was really so influential. Even the children knew about them. They had been rich for generations, but the current head had done the impossible. They say that all the money from the south ends up flowing into this family's pockets. The knight was delighted, but he was immediately reassured. He didn't understand why everyone was doing this to him, since everyone was excited right now. This pretty girl is from an unrealistically rich family. If you lined up 100 knights and asked them what they thought, they would all say the same thing without hesitation. They'd say they'd give their word for it. The knight said that if you tie your life to this girl, all your wishes will come true. The guy who tried to kick him out didn't understand what was wrong with him. In the end, the guy just and said he'd go out on his own. The guy called him an asshole and said that he should stop after the order. He also asked if all the beasts behind the barrier had been destroyed. The knight said they had destroyed them, but no one knew how many had breed again over the winter. The boy was angry because he asked him to deal with it, because more people would be coming to the temple soon.